Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Toffee Blues, and welcome to an opposition view for the game at Goodison Park against Bournemouth coming up on Saturday, I believe it is. I'm joined here today by Craig from Up the Cherries in All Departments. How are you?
Yeah, all good, all good. Although slightly nervous about this game. Likewise, I'm sure the Everton fans are as well.
Yeah, well, we'll get straight into the first question. Bournemouth are currently sat 19th in the league with 3
Yeah.
points, all three of those points coming from draws. What are your
Mm.
thoughts on the season so far?
Well, at the end of last season, as you probably saw in the final game, that was managed by Gary O'Neill, unbeknown to us at the time, um, the football from ourselves wasn't attractive. To be honest, the football from Everton wasn't really attractive either, let's be fair. But one thing that I would say is we do seem to be playing a lot nicer, sexier style of football. Now, you might think, well, everything's rosy, we'll start picking up points after time. I'm concerned. And the reason being is that we're playing this possession-based football, passing the ball around, and these players are probably taking too long to adapt, might not even be able to adapt at all. Um, you know, Solanke, who was scoring quite a few last season, and we was getting more goals from the likes of Billing. Of course, Lerma's no longer here, but other players as well around him were scoring goals. That seems to have dried up to an extent. At the defence, even though I say our defence has got stronger because of this style of play, it's left more gaps. It's left us more open, and we've conceded silly goals, such as the goals that we conceded against Brighton. So, of course, the equaliser for Brighton was an absolute joke. Neto should have called for it and claimed it. He is a top class goalkeeper. The two of them made a mishap. But I'm not going to be too harsh on Neto because what happened from the kickoff, our own kickoff, 16 seconds later, we was 2-1 down. Matoma had scored. And I just think that this style of play that we're playing, pass, 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 is yeah, it's better to watch on the eye. Loads of people said it's sexier football and nice but is it effective at this moment in time? No. And I think we need to revert back to basics. So at this moment in time, to answer your question, and it's a bit of a long-winded one, uh, I'm not very impressed with this season so far at all. And I'm looking over our shoulders now and thinking, when are we going to do something to mix this up?
Yeah, and like you said, it's been a bit of a difficult one because the style's better, but then the results are worse in a sense where, your recent fixtures, you're coming off a 2-0 win against Stoke in the Carabao Cup, but then there's the 4-0 loss against Arsenal too.
Yeah.
And, the new manager, I think it's Andoni Iraola, and I
Yeah.
believe, very highly rated at Valladolid, I believe, had them punching well above their weight in La Liga, if I remember correctly, and then you brought him in, quite shocking everyone, kind of kicking Gary O'Neill out of the door after what was a very successful season and stints in the season where what probably saved you from what looked like relegation at the start. Gary O'Neill came in and saved you. And I guess
Mm.
the results and talking about the manager really link. You mentioned it a little bit there. So what are your thoughts on the manager overall and the results that the club are getting based on just the performance side of things?
Well, he was at Rayo Vallecano, so it
I
does
can't,
start with
that's
a
the
V. Yeah,
that's the one.
Vallecano. He does start with a V. To be honest, I've made the error before, so honestly, but um, when he come in, and I was a big Gary O'Neill fan, and I was. It's weird when I watch back the actual videos on my channel. The first initial video when it was announced was one of complete and utter disbelief. This man's kept us in the Premier League against all odds. Let's be honest, Scott Parker left us, in a terrible state after that thrashing just across the park. At 9-0, Gary steadied the ship from the Liverpool game all the way up to the Southampton game last season. Every other team in the Premier League had been beaten. We did go on a bad spell, around Christmas, and then he picked up up again. Yeah, the last 4 games weren't particularly very good, but it was initially disbelief. Now, following Spanish football in a limited capacity, but knowing quite a bit about it, um, I knew that Iriola was being touted as the next Leeds manager, and Leeds were after him. And some links as well that I've got, that link was quite strong. I personally think that the decision to replace Gary O'Neill was made during the winter months, made during the World Cup. Um, we went after Bielsa, and of course, one of Bielsa's prodigies or players that he, managed in quite a lot of capacity was his captain, believe it or not, at Athletic Bilbao, was Iriola. So as soon as it was announced, it kind of all made sense. And in fact, it went from this complete and total disbelief to, I understand why they've done this now. Because if we don't go in for Iriola, considering what he's done at Vallecano, which is like the equivalent of taking Luton Town into the Premier League, he even got Vallecano at one point into the Champions League spaces. I know he couldn't keep him there, but that is like taking Luton Town on that sort of journey. And when the decision was made, it kind of made sense. I do. There's one or two things with Andoni Iraola, and I hope it's the first one. The first one is that he is a good manager, but the players are just taking a little bit too long to get used to his style of play. The other alternative, though, is that the Vallecano team carried him over there. And is he really as good? Because he had quite a bad spell, believe it or not, in Cyprus, right at the start of his managerial career. And he had a decent spell at Miranda's before joining Vallecano. Is he really that good? Was it just a case that, effectively a side had come together, a bit like Leicester City had, when they won the Premier League, come together and he took them on and, did really, really well.
Yeah, I think it's one of those where it's a difficult one because it's one of those where, like you said, a disciple of Bielsa. Then, of course, there's the link to Bournemouth wanting Bielsa. So, like you said, it was almost natural that's come into this. And then you've brought
Yeah,
this manager in with a more flashy play style. I don't
yeah,
know exactly the ins and outs, but clips were floating around of him managing to help Falcao roll back the years a few times in the
yeah,
team, and then but then you come into this summer specifically and you spend, I think I had a look, it was about 120 million euros.
yeah, I
I'm
know.
I'm not going to sit there and start transferring that into pounds and stuff. But then there was
Mm,
also loan signings like Sinistero. And one thing I can say as an Everton fan is it looked like towards the end a lot of the signings that we got linked to ended up going to Bournemouth. So if you would have told an Everton fan this is the transfers Bournemouth made, um, you know, we'd have been through the roof. And you especially look at someone, and I think you'll be able to speak more. And like I think you mentioned that he's injured, but bringing in a name like names like Alex Scott, bringing in Sinistera, Max Aarons, who again surprised he was still at Norwich when I found out he moved. It looked like a transfer window. Tyler Adams, who was one of the shining stars for Leeds, it was a transfer window that I can imagine you were very happy with as a Bournemouth fan, especially since knowing about Vallecano, you also knew that these players would fit that style of play. So, what are your thoughts on it now, after a bit of time's passed?
Um, I think Iriola has to get 6 points from the next 3 games because after Everton, we have, the visits from Wolves and Burnley. Now, these 3 games, this is where our season starts. Yeah, we have had a hard start to the season. But the problem is, and my argument is that the mistakes that are being made against the likes of Brighton aren't being corrected in the game against Arsenal. And my thought ahead of this game is if we play the style that we are playing under Iriola, if we play the style like we and revert back to what Gary O'Neill was doing, we've got a very, very good chance of coming away from Goodison Park with 3 points. if we carry on playing like we are under Iriola, pass, that is going to play straight into Sean Dyche's hands because you look at Arsenal. Arsenal can play it that way because their players are used to it. They were used to it under Unai Emery. They were used to it under Arsene Wenger. These players aren't used to that. The last manager that played, and he didn't even play, exactly the same sort of style as Iriola is trying to adopt. But the last manager who you could say played it in a similar sort of fashion was Eddie Howe. And of course, a number of years have, passed since Eddie was at the club. A fantastic manager, as everybody can see now. But I think my honest opinion is that I'm worried. I think we've signed a lot of good players. We've signed some top talent. Is that top talent adapting to Aurelio's style of play? No. I think even in the January window, back then, I think the signings that we made in Dongo Atara, Hamid Traore, and players like that were actually bought for Iriola's style of play. Not Gary O'Neill's, but Gary got the best out of those players, and it was a lot more direct. It wasn't pretty, but we were getting the results. We got the results 4-1 against Leeds towards the end of the season. That was the game that kept us up. Yeah, I think Gary took his foot off the gas in the last four, much probably to the pleasure of the Everton fans. But I think that's probably what did Gary, was that he took his foot off the gas. But maybe he had no, maybe there was no other option. Maybe he was just a dead man walking, and he'd just done a fantastic job. But yeah, I'm worried because we've spent a lot of money, and I just don't think that this style of play is fitting.
Does spending this much money give you some hope though? Because of course there's new owners involved at Bournemouth. Got quite a lot of publicity because of some of the names. Oh, I've just dropped some. The name spearheading, or
Yeah.
the public face of that takeover. Does this give you some hope that you look at a team like Bournemouth in the Premier League compared to what's around anyway? Is there kind of needs to be that ownership, because even it doesn't matter how well a team like Bournemouth performs, there's always going to be that stigma of relegation. It's kind of similar to Everton, where it doesn't matter how crap we are, in a sense that because there's the history there, everyone just looks at us and goes, oh, well, until the season starts and goes, well, they'll not get relegated. It's Everton.
Yeah. Um, I think Bill Foley come out at the start of the season. In fact, on my channel, I do have Talksport were really good, um, and they allowed us to use the entire part that they did. And when Jim White spoke to Bill Foley, and his view was, we're going to build season on season. And this season was going to be a stepping stone to 3 years' time and the talk of Europe. Do I think he'll get there? Well, firstly, I think he probably will need to make a change if this. Well, he definitely need to make a change if this continues. I think he'll need to look at the style of play that is being managed. There's an ambition there. There's an ambition there, but I think this season has now become a case of, right, okay, we want to finish at around about 13th, 14th spot, to becoming one where we are going to be fighting relegation. There's no two doubts about it. These players probably take a little bit more time to adapt, but Alex Scott, he might hit the ground running when he gets back for injury and really take the Premier League by storm. But there's no proof in that. There's no guarantees because he's never played in this league. Tyler Adams, I think, will be good, once he's back to full fitness. He did play a little bit of the game against Stoke. And I think he'll fit into that Jefferson Lerma role. Is he going to be able to score the goals that Jefferson did? Well, we'll have to wait and see. There's a lot of question marks over this side. And of course, we need to get Dom scoring more. And I think we might have to revert back to type. As much as Iriola and Bill Foley don't want to do it, I think that might be the way we can get the results to keep ourselves safe.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's a change of style might be needed at Bournemouth, and that's more down to the manager and the system. But what do you think about Bournemouth's actual squad?
I think, man to man, if you was to compare the two squads, I think at this moment in time, I think we've got a stronger squad than Everton across the whole of the pitch. Goalkeeping department, I would say much of a muchness. Probably Pickford's a little bit stronger. But I think the squad is strong. Max Aaron's, Kirke's highly rated, looks quality. Zabania and Lloyd Kelly, for example. He's come under a rough time from our fans, but he's been wanted by Newcastle and Spurs. Let's be honest, Eddie Howe and Postecoglou aren't, you know, they're not going to want him if he's not up to that quality. So, and I think we've seen that quality from him at times last season. Midfield, we're very, very strong. We're awash with wingers, probably too many wingers. And Solanke can do it up front, but the reason we're not is because of that style. And we've seen it throughout the years that teams, you know, there's always that cliche, they're too good to go down. No team's too good to go down. I think what, we have to look at is our players are good quality players. And, we're probably not one of the weakest three teams in the Premier League, on paper. But I think the style we're playing, isn't, meeting. It's not getting the best abilities out of this team.
Yeah, and I think Leicester are the team. I think I've that highlight that perfectly. You look at,
Yeah.
and even Southampton with the money they've brought in for some players, looking at it when they've sold them.
Mhm.
But then, well, if you go for your performances so far, who do you think have been Bournemouth's best and worst player? And then after that, who out of all the players in the squad, who do you think is going to be the one to stand out for the rest of the season and be your key player in advancing this season?
I think Kirkes is, looked excellent, and I think he's one really for the future. Um, best players, best players so far this season, I would say, is probably Dom. Dom's been excellent. He has been tracking back. He's a good forward, but he's not one of those target men that you can just fire the ball up to, and he gets something on it. We've got Kiefer Moore for that, and for some reason he's not favoured by Areola. So I would say probably Dom is probably the best player so far this season. The weakest so far, and this is a surprise, and this is probably why, because of the style as well, and why it's not working, is Phil Bill. Phil Bill has been, was excellent last season. And because he's not linking up with Dom as well, because of this pass style, he doesn't play like that. He doesn't play like that. He looks to thread the ball through. He looks to be creative. Passing sidewards doesn't work for him. I think he's been the weakest. So I think it's quite harsh for me to say he's the weakest player, but at the same time, that's what I've seen on the pitch so far, to be honest, mate.
Yeah. And you mentioned a few players there. Do you think someone like Solanke is going to be the danger man against Everton, or do you think it's going to be someone else who's going to, really be able to take advantage of the game?
Well, to be honest, I don't think anybody's going to be the danger man if we play in this style. But if we revert back to type, Solanke is very, very dangerous. Billing, very dangerous if we revert back to type. The wingers, we've got high quality wingers. David Brooks, I would start all day against Everton. And that brings on to another bugbear that Iriola hasn't played him, as much. He's favoured Christie. Christie's a good player. I'm not doubting that. But David Brooks brings something a little bit different. So if Brooks is playing, expect some very, very good crosses, some creative play into that box, things to be opened up. Um, it just depends if we go a little bit more direct, and I don't mean not passing it around and but some with that little bit more impetus because at the moment, if we're passing around at the back, we're making stupid mistakes, which then we concede the ball to the other team, and then as we saw against Brighton, they put it in the back of the net. So that's really the concern. But I think Brooks is the one to watch out for if he plays, which he should do, but he hasn't been. I think Solanke, is probably the biggest threat. And Phil Bill, he's got it in him. He's definitely got it in him. He's a confidence player, but as soon as he gets a goal, and you know, if we work to his strengths, then I think he's dangerous, and I think he want to prove something to Areola as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned the passing on the back. There's still little mistakes. Is that somewhere where where Everton could cause real danger? Because I think Everton have shown over these past few games. I think not so much against Luton, but more so against Villa in the cup. Was that with players like Harrison and Garner in the middle, which players who can press really high, who can cause problems. Does that give you a little bit of worry as someone who is worried about this team making mistakes? Planning out of the back that you could play it out to a fullback and then all of a sudden three players are surrounding them. And, who do you think is going to be Everton's danger man in the game?
Calvert-Lewin. Calvert-Lewin most definitely is going to be a big threat. Nana is, a good player as well. And I think the thing is we do press as well. We press high. Um, and I think what Dyche will do, and this is my honest opinion, Dyche will try and hit us quickly on the break. So he'll just sit back, allow us to pass the ball around. We will have more possession, and if the two styles go side and side, which I've seen, Dyche will just let Everton sit back. We'll just be passing around, controlling the game. We'll look very, very pretty. We'll get to a certain point. Solanke will be looking for the perfect goal because that seems to be what Iriola's looking for. One of the defenders, Tarkowski, will take it away from him, and the break will be on, and it'll be quick. And that's how Everton are going to score. And it will leave too much for the defenders, Zabania and Senesi, the central defenders, to do. I think personally that is how I'm worried about this game's panning out.
Yeah, and the last two questions that are football related anyway.
Yeah, of course.
What's your likely lineup going into the game, and then what do you think the final score is going to be?
I think we'll probably stay with the similar sort of lineup that we have been. I think Neto will start in goal, Kirkes on the left, um, Aaron's on the right, Senesi and Zabania. I would imagine, although I hope, Tyler Adams is back. If he is back, I think he'll go into a defensive midfield role. What I'd like to see happen, I think on the left-hand side, I'd start Sinistera. I'd give Sinistera a start. In the centre, I'd probably play Joe Rothwell and Phil Bill. And then on the right-hand side, David Brooks with Solanke up front. So it probably will look a little bit more defensive, but of course, Phil Bill pushing forwards to assist Solanke, when he can do. That's what I'd like to see happen. It's probably not going to happen because I think Christie will probably play. And don't get me wrong, Christie's a good player, but I just think that this game is going to be right for David Brooks. And I think he's just got so much talent that, we should utilise it. It's been really disappointing so far this season.
Yeah. And then what do you think the final score is going to be?
I did this earlier on a show, and I always say I'm never going to bet against my own team, but at this moment in time, after that Arsenal performance, after seeing no improvement from the previous week against Brighton, I think I can't see any result apart from Everton getting a 2-1 win. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I will be if we play the same sort of style. Now, if Iriola does change it up, then all bets are off, really. But I think if we do what we are going to do, it's going to play straight into Dyche's hands. And going back to quite a few years ago, Dyche brought Burnley down here, and we got beat 2-1 under Eddie Howe, of course, at the time. We was in full control of the game, and Dyche hit us quickly on the break twice, and that killed it. And that killed it. And I can't. In fact, I think it'd probably be more effective against Iriola as it was against Eddie.
Yeah. And well, the final question we like to ask something a little off kilter, a little something that I mean, this one can be football related if you want, but
Yeah.
you were able to sit at a table with three random people that could be anyone you want for a meal. Who are they and why?
Well, Eddie Howe would be one. I'll tell you what, I'll keep it fairly football related. Eddie Howe would be one. Um, would be the other two? Do you know what? I've got so much. I've got a lot of time for Everton. I did follow Everton quite heavily as a kid. So I've got a soft spot. I hope both sides survive. In all honesty, even though I said to Harry Redknapp at the start of the season, I can't see Everton surviving. You know, um, but Duncan Ferguson, most definitely. Duncan Ferguson, absolute legend. And in fact, comes across so well. Nice bloke, even though he's a tough man. And the third one, well, I'll tell you what, you can't have Eddie there if you don't have Jason there, can you? Because let's be honest, he's got to be the center of attention. He'll be the center of every single photo as well. So yeah, you got to have Jason there. I've met Jason several times, but yeah, he'll be feeling left out if he don't come along.
That is all for this edition of the Opposition View. If you did enjoy, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to check out Up Cherries in all departments too, whoever on YouTube, Twitter, or anything. And thank you for coming on, Craig.
Not a problem at all, Callum, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an absolute pleasure, mate.
Make sure to check us out on Twitter too, our Everton Newsfeed, and we will see you all for the next video and or live stream. Thank you for watching, everybody. Goodbye.